Yes.
Hello.
Hello? Is that good?
Hello.
Okay. Come on, Stanley. Good evening, Grace. We're live now. For those of you who are attending and watching us online, we apologize for the delay. We had some technical difficulties, and this is round 2 of starting our family meeting. So sorry for those of you who are watching us online. And for those of you who are here in person, I want to thank you and welcome you to our family meeting. We're going to be discussing a few topics here. We're going to be talking about our budget and also our policy for the overflow funds, and also just the elders wanted to give you an update on changes we would like to make in light of the recent laws that have came upon. And it's not a change that we're making right now, but it's just an update that we wanted to give to the body. So for those of you, if you have a question here in the room, we have 2 microphones here. If you can raise your hand, come to the microphone and speak your question into the microphone, that would be helpful. For the listeners online, they will be able to listen to your question also. And for those of you who are watching us online, if you have a question, please do type your question in the comment section in our video, and Scott is fielding the questions today, so he will be able to speak those questions and we will be able to answer that. We have our finance team up here on the stage, and I know I will hand it over to our finance team to go over the budget here in a minute. Let's just go to the Lord in prayer and begin tonight's meeting. Kathleen, would you please lead us in round 2 of prayer?
Once again, Father, we thank you so much for all the provision you give us. We thank you for all the skills that we're learning in dealing with technical stuff, and we thank you for all the equipment that you've given us. And we thank you especially, Father, for finances, and for those who have wisdom to oversee those for us and to walk us through this process. We ask, Father, if there's things that need to be discussed, that those would be the things that would be brought up tonight. Father, we just ask that you would focus us on being good stewards and using what you've given us wisely. Ask that you would bless this time, and we ask most of all that you would cause it to be honoring to you, and for us to be a blessing to you. It's in Jesus' name that we pray.
Amen. Thank you, Kathleen. I now hand it over to our finance team to present the budget.
Well, first off, I think on behalf of the finance team, but certainly just as a church as a whole, I want to just give praise to the Father for his provision for us in 2020. We have been blessed that the body has given sacrificially, and we've been able to provide for our staff and for all of the needs here at the church, and for those ministry needs that we've been able to do in this most unusual year. I think just in articles and emails and things, that newsletters that I'm on, that's not the case across the board with all churches and various sizes. So that's something that we should not overlook in giving praise for his provision this year. So when we look at our third quarter financials, which those have been made available to everyone. We were at 74% of our budget of $410,000 that we had received an offering through September 30th. So we're very thankful for the Lord's provision, but we also, as a finance team, also want to be mindful of the reality of where we are and where we stand and what we are getting week to week. So with that said, we felt also with the uncertainty and the uncertainty going forward just as a result of COVID and when we might be able to not have to deal with limitations, we felt it prudent to keep our budget for 2021 at the same $410,000. So with that said, the budget itself did not change a whole lot within each ministry area or fixed cost area. A few tweaks here and there, mainly because we would have fixed costs that might have increased, and then therefore something else might have to be slightly decreased just to be able to cover for that and allow for those increases. And that's looking at utility cost or property insurance, just things that we have to pay that we don't have control over. So I guess at this point, I would open it up to any questions that you have on anything specific within the budget, given the fact that it really did not change. One thing I will say is there were no staff support increases this year, basically for the same reason, or kind of what we've said for the last several years, and that is not having the room in our budget to be able to do that, especially then also keeping our budget at the same amount, the same level. We've also adopted kind of it's not a rule, but the idea that we want to keep our staff support no higher than 60% of our total budget. So we're at 59.54 at a $410,000 budget currently. So we would love to be able to, have the growth and be at a point to be able to increase our budget and then therefore be able to honor and be able to support our staff with an increase. But at this point, for 2021, we weren't able to do that. So I guess that's the one question that often comes up, as it should. So does anyone have any questions?
Finance team is probably not something, I'm asking about something that's not in the budget, so I guess that'd be more of a council issue. I don't see any provision for a church-wide retreat. As in past years that we'd put money in reserve for a church-wide retreat, which was once every year, then every 2 years, and then every 3 years, but at least it was in the plan. So, council, do we not have a plan?
I can speak to my understanding, and then the council can certainly add to that. I'm sure they're, have thought through that as well. It was my understanding that several years ago, we opted not to continue to fund that because of the way our Grace body had diversified, and so that we wanted to use funds that would affect the whole body, and we just felt like that there would be many within our body that might not participate. And so that was the thought process several years ago. So no, we've not, from a finance team, I've not brought that up or thought through that since
Right.
that time.
Council?
So I'll go ahead and stand. James is right here, so I'm not trying to run him off the mic. We just need to space out. The council has not discussed it. Just for clarification, some context, retreats were, as Kathy said, they were no longer being funded before I came. So I have no experience here personally what retreats were like. And so it's not something I personally have against retreats or anything like that. It's just something that never was here. I never have brought it up with the council. I brought it up with the staff at different points in time to see is what exactly was this like, what exactly happened, how much did it cost, is this something that we should consider doing again, what would it be like, who would champion that? Like it never seems that it gains traction and momentum as if someone would be able to take it and that we'd have the ability to do it at this point in time. It's not that the council's against it or that we have shot down the idea. The council hasn't even discussed it. And whenever I do discuss it with staff, it doesn't seem there's any traction to move forward with it. So I just now learned something new for the first time when Kathy said everything she did about the diversity, and that was part of the decision at that time.
I'd say I remember it was cut back mainly because of finances, not that it was due to diversity of the body.
Well, I think we had to cut the budget as we lost membership. And so then you have to make choices of how you're going to budget funds. And with limited and less funds available to budget with, that was the thought process behind not funding that at the time.
Right. I would just ask the finance team, the council, to look at it again, and if we don't put something in the budget, it will never occur. As in a mission trip, if you don't plan, it won't occur. So it's therefore by not putting at least something in the budget in reserve, we are saying we will not have.
Certainly, that would be the
So-
case with anything. So I think leadership needs to make that decision
Right.
prior to, yeah.
Hello. Got a quick question. I've got a question about the audio-visual ministry. And I just want to start out by saying I'm not fussing. I'm just asking for clarity. But last year, we spent $2,950. This upcoming budget, we're looking at spending $3,100. So that's about $3,000 a year. And I'm just asking for clarity. Where is that money going? What are we buying? What's just asking.
I think that Stephen can speak more to what his thoughts are there and what those funds cover year to year. I think it varies depending on need. And just like many ministries, he often would like to have more, but again, with the budget not increasing, we're not able to do that.
Yeah, we've had a lot of just unexpected kind of expenses going with, last year we bought these new main speakers, and that was the bulk of that budget last year. This year, with buying necessary equipment for the live stream, obviously we had some help with some donations for that, and we want to do this live stream thing better. We want to be excellent at it and not have issues like we had today for it. So we're just trying to accommodate not only our body that comes every Sunday, but our body that's not able to come, to still make them feel at home. And some of that is just coming from our necessary needs to do that in an excellent way, and not just hold up a phone and say, here, we're live streaming on our YouTube channel. Does that help, Chris? Okay.
Any other questions? If I get anything.
Kathy, on page 2, there's, under youth, there's an $1,800 reduction on mission/camp. Could you speak to that? And then I think that, I think I know why. On page 3, the bottom category of outside care, the outdoor lighting, is completely eliminated, and I think I know the answer to that, but speak to those two,
Okay,
please.
certainly. So, Lord willing, if there's a mission trip in 2021 that the youth and young adults can participate in, as in if everyone's able to go, it's my understanding it'll be a trip to Peru, which will also involve and be open to anyone, but MLT, I guess, is, they've budgeted for that. So, therefore, I think initially when we got budget requests, we realized that the youth and young adult request included funds for that as well as MLT. So for 2021, all of the funding for that trip is under the international missions. What's it called? The world missions, sorry. So those funds are on page 1 under world missions, the 4th item down, mission trip expenses and scholarships. So that would be including funding for anyone that's able to go to Peru, whether that be youth, young adults, or other adults and trip leaders, et cetera. We are aware, and I've made a note that, if 2022 that's not the case and the youth are planning something different, then we're going to have to make sure we reinstate funds for youth and young adult for the following year. And then you mentioned the outdoor lighting near the bottom of page 3. That is because we installed LED lighting in the parking lot. So the $1,800 that has been budgeted in the past, including this current budget year, was for bulbs and whatever else had to be done prior to the LED. So we should not be incurring that expense going forward.
There's no questions yet, but I would just say that having some time afterwards, after you say something, would be good, because there's about a 30-minute or 30-second delay from the stream.
Okay. I will say, while possibly those are thinking or typing questions, when we initially put all of the ministry leader requests together, requests from ministry leaders plus increases that I was aware of, I will use again property insurance as an example. The total budget, when you added all that up, it was about $427,000. So when we met initially, we're looking at 427, and then how do we get that to 410? So that's not a fun meeting, but so there are ministries that were asked to reduce their budget for obvious reasons, but that's hard to do, for us to do.
Is the surplus going to be a separate topic tonight, or? Okay.
For those of you online, if you are still thinking about your question or trying to type that in, please do so. And Scott will be able to ask that here. Finance team, I just want to thank you. I know you said, for everything that you have to put into the review process and, get us into a manageable budget. I know it is a whole lot, and, we really do appreciate everything that you do. So as we go into our next topic, which is talking about the policy about overflow funds, I'll just ask that you would introduce that, and then we'll also have the elders come up and then talk about that, and then see if you have any questions on that.
So this is something that finance team has been thinking through for some time. I'd say really started the emails with the really long email stream back in early summer. But part of that was a result of questions that we got, maybe it was last year at the family meeting, and that was basically who approves unbudgeted expenses? How we approve a budget as a church, we vote on it, and then, inevitably, we're going to have something come up that's not budgeted. And so when you review the quarterly financials, you always see these unbudgeted expenses kind of as the last expense line item listed before the bottom line. And so in an effort to try and put some type of procedure in place or accountability there, that's kind of how this all started. And so we determined and I don't know if this is in the letter, I don't think it is, as a finance team, we said, what are we comfortable approving that's an unbudgeted expense? How much? And we came to the unanimous conclusion that $1,000 was the most we would be comfortable approving. And obviously, we would not take that lightly either in considering that expense. But anything over that, we felt like then we also would want to have approval from the elders for that. So with that said, just in mulling and thinking all that over, we Also know that over the life of the church, we've been blessed to basically have received more in offering than we've spent, just, life to date of the church. And so that amount, you figure, okay, just like with your own personal budget, how much do you need to keep versus being able to use for ministry or for whatever areas we deem that would be helpful for ministry to the church and to the church body. And so that then was what we sought to try and nail down with some type of policy or procedure, because we want to be good stewards and we want to be prudent and we don't want to spend it all frivolously, but we don't want to hoard it, so what makes sense? And so we looked at I called SBCV and I called BGAV, and then just in reading articles and newsletters and things that I'm receive regularly about what should you have in the way of a surplus, money in the bank as a church. And so some would say 6 months of operating expenses, and then some would say 3 months. And so recently, let's see, I think I have that here. I saw an article, or maybe it was a webinar. I'm sorry, it was a webinar that I listened to, and they said a sound level or a sound amount of operating funds to have was on hand would be 3 months. Strong level would be 6 months. But I think we as a church would not be one to want to have too much without, and then being able to limit ministry. So we had recommended to the elders that we adopt the 3-month operating expenses. And so for several years now, we've had the $410,000 budget. And so 3 months of that would be 25% or $102,500. So that's what we were recommending that we keep as a surplus. And anything over and above that, what are we going to do with it? What do we use that for? And so that's where we sought the Council of the Elders and are recommending what you saw in the cover letter with the budget, which is 50% to be used for outreach type ministries and 50% to be used for unforeseeable expenses, like what comes up every year that we don't budget for. If we've got $10,000 budgeted for our facilities and grounds in 2021, but we have 2 HVAC units blow up, maybe we replace one, we got another one that blows up, well then that would be part of this other 50%, which would be considered unforeseeable expenses, things that we wouldn't plan for. So that is the idea behind, how this all started and how we came to this recommendation. I'm trying to think. Seems like I was going to say something else, but I forgot what it was. So what we are thinking in terms of these funds, so for example, if we have X amount of money in the bank for our operating funds, we would, at any point in time, but we're saying that we would do it each year end, once we have year-end financials finalized, which would typically be sometime in February. We would look at how much we have in the operating funds, a checking and a savings account currently, and then we would take that total minus payables, bills that were due at the end of the year that we didn't pay until the new year in January. And then we would obviously then take out any restricted or designated funds because those are already set aside for something. So whatever that amount was, then we would subtract 3 months of our operating budget for the current year that we're in. So if we're doing it in February of 2021, then it would be $410,000. So we would subtract $102,500 from those surplus funds. And just to give you an example, had we adopted this and used 2019's year-end numbers, we would have had $14,700 to be considered overflow funds. So 50%, what we're proposing would be 50% of that would be for outreach ministries, and the other 50% available for unforeseeable things that come up. So this year, if anyone's looked at the third quarter financials, less ministry has been able to happen because of our COVID restrictions. Therefore, we are currently just over $20,000 at the end of third quarter, where we've received that much more in offering or general giving than we've spent. So if that trend continued, then at the end of 2020, so in February, when we finalize those numbers, that would increase that surplus, that additional surplus, which we want to term overflow funds. That would increase that amount. And again, to be used in these ways that we're proposing. So I'd love to hear questions, or if you all have finance team, anything to comment on.
Good evening again. So, Kathy, just to add on what you did, what you said, Jim asked the question about the LED lighting, and so, we pumped in, I think, $6,400 to redo all of our lighting. So our lighting has been a pain. Our exterior lighting has been an absolute pain for the deacons, because it was old technology. The light bulbs would go out, some of the ballasts would burn out, and so it would take an electrical company to come, with a lift truck, which are expensive. So what I would do is I would wait for 2, 3, 4, 5 light bulbs to go out, so half of our parking lot would be dead, because I didn't want to call them every time one light bulb went out, then we would just get eaten alive. So we switched over to LED lighting. So we don't expect an issue for 10 to 20 years on the LED lighting. And I don't know if any of y'all have been out here at night, but our parking lot is lit up. It is very nice. It's very bright. We do meet county code. I know we may get some fussing from neighbors, but if we do, just let me know. I can prove that we meet all of our county codes. So I've got a couple questions about what you just described as the surplus operating funds. So Kathy, last year it was $14,000, and this year we think it's going to be about $20,000. So is that $34,000 altogether? Mm-hmm. Okay, so at the end of this year, we may be in the $35,000 to $40,000 range on surplus funds.
As long as giving continues
Yeah.
in the way it has the first 3 quarters.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So let's just use $35,000 as a safe number. So half of that, $17,000, would go to the local ministry, the world ministry, the care, and then the other half would go to unbudgeted, unforeseen expenses. On that email that you all sent out a couple weeks ago, you all specifically said, and I just quoted it here, because of the capital campaign, team task is to calculate foreseeable needs, the capital campaign cited needs will not be considered when dispersing the available overflow funds for funds mentioned above. So I just take a little issue with that. Most of y'all know we've started a capital campaign team, and I'm kind of heading that up. And so right now, we are very easily looking at the $200,000 to $300,000 range, and we'll be bringing that to you all in a couple months. But that financial need is cutting a lot of things. We've already priced some things out, and we're adding things up, and we could very easily spend $400,000 on upgrading things. But we think that'll just be too much of a burden. So, being the head deacon the last 6 years, and y'all know that I do this for Henrico County. I maintain things, I replace things, I refresh things. And so we've got a lot of things that, that are 23 years old. Our carpet, our ceramic tile, our bathrooms, our kitchen cabinets are falling apart. We got asphalt cracking. We got mechanical units that are failing that we're putting Band-Aids on. So I just ask that you all reconsider that some of that overflow money could be seed money for our capital campaigns. We're going to recommend hiring an interior designer to help us select, carpet and colors. Some of y'all may remember that Whitney Campbell helped us, with our refresh here. And she has started her own company. And so, 3 or 4 years ago, we bent our arm as much as we could, to get this, this color stuff out of her. So we're not going to go back and ask her to do it for free. We're going to ask for a proposal from her. Also, we plan on hiring a sound engineer to help us with our sound equipment. That way, Steve and Josh, who haven't been trained professionally, aren't guessing. And what I do for a living is that we hire professionals, and we bring them in, we show them our problems. That's what they do for a living. And, we get a proposal from them. And so that's kind of where we're headed at, on the capital campaign. But I guess I'm just asking that, our capital campaign fund, could become a burden for some of us. I think we're going to take our example of what we did with the youth building, and that we're going to come up with a number. We're going to try and do a 2 to 3 year capital campaign where we're going to ask people to give beyond their tithing, which is going to be hard. It's not simple. I don't have $5,000-$6,000 in my pocket to write a check. So I'm just asking that the council and the finance team just reconsider that some of that money could assist us in the capital campaign. So that's all I have.
Chris, one thing I think you watch those financials, some of those things like a hawk, so you probably are already aware, but if you looked at the third quarter financials or any quarter financials recently, we do have $7,000 in facility and grounds in the bank. It's like our old leftover building fund. So I was wanting to hang on to some of that because we weren't proposing a policy such as the one we're proposing now, where we can have funds that are kind of earmarked for unforeseeable needs. I was thinking of this $7,000 as something that would help if we had. I keep using this because it's a $7,000 amount, and that's about what the HVAC costs. So, I would think with a policy where we do have excess surplus funds, that facility and grounds balance, it's $7,075, is certainly something that could be available to start with, help start the capital campaign as well.
This is a question from Sarah Edens. Do we currently have 3 months of operating costs already in the bank?
Do we have what, I'm sorry?
Do we currently have 3 months of operating costs already in the bank?
Yes, we do.
Okay, here's a question from Catherine Chang. Regarding missions giving, I noticed that it looks like we have dropped our Dover missions offering. I am really happy to see that we're still in fellowship with these sister churches in Central Virginia and are still giving to the Dover Association in general. But wonder why it's being recommended to drop our participation in their missions offering collection.
Oh.
I know it's uncomfortable for us to just get up and go to a microphone, but if we could have one person just take the lead on it, say that it's like.
Yeah, let's wait. Is my mic on? Yeah? Okay. So speaking to the issue of the Dover offering, LMT met that $300 a year fell under our budget. So when we met to consider this new budget, we were looking, our kind of thought is, as a team, is that every year everything's on the table in terms of support and what we give toward things, because we believe every year things may be a little different. So kind of our policy is we recognize that some things were important and they still are, but that some things need to be readdressed when we look at the new year. And so we just want to put everything onto the table. When we did that, we looked at some things that we want to do within our body this year. Particularly if you guys remember a few months ago, we supported Lisa Prejean and some others who led ministry over in Nottingham Green apartments for food distribution. We're looking to kind of further some of those efforts in 2021. We want more Lisa Prejeans coming forward who say, hey, I have an idea and I want to champion it and I want to lead local ministry in this way. And so we knew that we couldn't, I knew being an elder that we had about a 400, we were going with the old budget from last year, kind of total amount. And while we could ask for some more, we wanted to also stay relatively the same. And so we were looking at moving things around. We just felt like, well, we don't have anyone connected with Dover in a real intimate way, going to the meetings, representing the church and really involved with Dover. I know in the past we've done some things that are somewhat connected with Dover, like our trip to Macedonia was kind of connected with Dover a little bit there. But we looked at it and we said, well, there's nobody, our church isn't really connected with Dover. And I think as we were looking at Dover as well, they were kind of moving in a different direction than where we kind of saw our church moving in terms of theologically and then how that works out practically speaking. So I guess as we considered all of that, we looked at, we could continue to give toward Dover, and that wouldn't be a bad thing, and that's not a judgment toward any church that does. But we thought we could empower and equip our own people for ministry in 2021. We could take that $300 and help another Lisa Prajan that comes forward with an awesome idea for local outreach. And we could take that $300 and invest it in our people for local outreach and ministry. So I know that was a super long answer, but that's why we kind of came to the place we did. And that's not saying, again, because every year the way that we're thinking about it as far as an LMT is everything is on the table for LMT as we look at it. We don't want, just the past to purely drive our future. So every year we're kind of looking at it. So who's to say next year, we'll consider things and we'll talk through them, certainly if anybody has any consideration. For Catherine or anybody else who might say, hey, I think that, we ought to keep supporting Dover or giving toward Dover, let me know. Come talk with me and I can share that with the team. Like I said, we try to consider and pray about all these things. So feel free to, text me or call me, email me, and I'd be glad to talk with you about that more.
Finance team, could you help clarify one of the matters on the overflow funds? I think might be confusing for some people. We say in there that we will make available these funds, like the first 50% to certain outreach ministries and the other 50% to Unbudgeted. I think people might have the impression that we're automatically going to distribute those funds. Could you help clarify what's actually happening versus what might be perceived?
Yes, thank you, Chris. That's when I said earlier, I think I forgot what I was going to say. That was it. So I guess we would, in February, I'm using February because that's typically when we would have year-end numbers available. We would make the calculation, and then at that time, we could communicate to the body, we have X amount of dollars, 50% for unforeseeable needs, 50% for outreach. And that is communicated, but we don't automatically say, okay, MLT, LMT, you get this much, we're going to prorate based on, it's just available. And then the ministry leaders would be submitting a request and be able to substantiate the need for their funding over and above their regular budget. So MLT would need to, or LMT, they would be expending their already approved budget first, and then at such time, if they were trying to do additional ministry that their budget did not allow for, but it was maybe a part of their original vision, but we just weren't able to afford them that many funds within the annual budget, then they would submit a request to council and finance team, and at that time, then we would look at that together for approval for those additional funds. So hopefully that helps clarify. And obviously for the unforeseeable needs, we already talked about finance team being comfortable with $1,000, but again, that's typically something that would be obvious that we would need to do, not just, hey, somebody had an idea, I forgot to budget for this, let me ask for it. At that time, if we're not comfortable approving it as a finance team, then we would, no matter the dollar amount, we would reach out to council for their review as well. And also to clarify, I think the question was relating to that one Dover mission offering under local ministry. But just to clarify for anyone that may have only heard part of that, we do, and it is budgeted, we give 1% to the Dover Baptist Association, 1% of our general offering. We are continuing to do that, so.
Thank you, Finance Committee, and thank you for your prayerful work as a team and working on this proposal as well as working with our budget. I think one of the things I would add, something that we talked about as elders in our council meeting, and it goes in line with what Paul wrote in 1 Corinthians 2, I think, where he says, he's quoting Isaiah 64:4, but he says, "No eye has seen, nor ear has heard, nor has it entered the mind of man what God has prepared for those who love him." And so as we think about using 50% of the overflow funds for ministry, outreach, MLT, LMT, care ministry, I think some of those things could come up, what God has prepared that we have not seen yet. And I think some of those things that could come to the forefront would be, again, opportunities to continue to reach out in the apartment community. There at Nottingham Green, there may be something that would come up with ministry, an ongoing ministry that could come up, ESL or discipleship Bible study, or maybe there could be, some other distribution that would include, being able to have a gospel witness with that. I know with the COVID among us, we don't know. It's I told one person one time that there is light at the end of the tunnel, but it's a long tunnel. And so we don't know how long it's going to be, but many people are struggling. I'm thinking of people who've had employment losses and, struggling with some of the rent or the utilities. And then the care ministry would be there for members as well as non-members. And I think the care ministry funds are very well distributed. I know that they're perfectly carefully done that. But there's times when that care ministry account, it gets pretty low. And again, funds, the healthy excess could be considered for those opportunities that God has prepared, but we do not see it right now. No.
Trying to form this as I go. So forgive me if I speak bluntly or directly. But as I look at the overflow funds kind of proposal, I just have a question as a ministry leader and as a staff member. As I look at it, I don't see, is there a direct line of, hey, finance team, we have a need in the worship area that could be covered by an overflow fund that's not budgeted in our 2020 budget, and we didn't think about it for a 2021 budget. How would I, as the ministry leader, then go to the finance team and say, hey, we would like to do X for this reason, and it would benefit the church in this way? Is that the right method to do that? And how would then you guys make the decision if you get an influx of those requests?
That's a good question. We would do that in conjunction with the elders. It would not be, especially if we're getting several requests at once, and depending on the dollar amount and how that compares to the availability, what we've earmarked as overflow funds, obviously, that would come into play. But I think we would certainly do that in conjunction with the elders and just looking at all of the requests. And I think we would look closely at, and this is just me saying this, this isn't something I'm speaking for the whole team, or certainly not for the elders, but I think, we need to look at what would allow us as a church to better ministry to the body and to our community. And so that, I think, would be an important factor in prioritizing if we need to do that. Hopefully we won't need to do that, but.
As an added question to that, is there an expected timeline going into 2021 that these proposed overflow funds would be available, and then here's a deadline for request, and then those funds would go elsewhere? Or is it going to be, hey, this is just going to be able to be used if a need arises, and it's just going to sit in the bank?
I'm not sure I completely understand what you're saying, but we are not going to disperse or approve amounts to certain ministries. I don't know if it's a first come, first serve. I mean, that's kind of what I'm thinking, but that doesn't have to be. But I guess because it's an unforeseeable need, I don't see it as, hey, this much money's up for grabs. Everybody get your request in, quite honestly.
Yeah, I guess as a selfish human being, I see that, and you're talking about thousands of dollars. I just think, oh man, there's some things that we would like to do in the worship area with that amount of money, or maybe some of that, but I don't want to speak for everyone else that is a better person than me and look at that same scenario.
I think the key word is unforeseeable, I would say. In the way what we're proposing for that 50%.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Y'all jump in, please jump in.
Another ministry leader with lots of things that we could use money for. They are not unforeseeable. Perhaps a ministry leader might have wanted a closet for years.
Perhaps
and
the capital
put it in the
campaign.
budget for the last 2 years, and it was cut because it's ridiculous. Take it up. Yeah, so it's possible that a ministry leader has wanted a closet for 3 or 4 years, has put it in the budget, knowing it would get cut because it was originally $20-some thousand. We got it down to $8 with sweat equity that we're just planning on you guys helping with if we ever were to get it. So I get the whole unforeseeable, but I'm wrestling a little bit just like Stephen. So, and this just seems like a fairy tale, but sometimes God does these things. What if we really have been able to budget well for the coming year? What if we get to this point next year and we've not spent much of that 50% of the overflow? Would things that we've wanted to budget for but could not budget for because we're limited, is there a place where those sorts of things might be considered? I don't want to make it difficult, but I don't want to live like we're in poverty if we're not.
But are you talking more facility type things?
I'm talking closet, let's just be.
Okay. I thought, have you talked to
I'm not
your
sure it's
husband?
going to make it through the campaign. I know that Brenda's championing it, but there are so many things for the capital campaign. And I know there are probably a few other things besides my precious little closet, big closet, that could be in that same boat, maybe some here in the worship center even. So just thinking philosophically, or, is there room for the foreseeable but never makes it through budget cuts? You don't have to answer.
It is, because I may defer to maybe an elder response to that as well, because they were, helped us in this proposal and how we might earmark these overflow funds. So I'd like to hear maybe some response from them. I just think that might be helpful.
So maybe I can help a little bit. It's not going to solve everything. First, we're talking about the capital campaign. Most people prior to the email that went out did not know about a capital campaign that was starting for a team that was gathering. Just a heads up to everyone, nothing's finalized on that except for who the team members are and who's been recommended for that team. They're going to let the elders know once they have more of a solid idea of what they're recommending. The elders would interact with the capital campaign team on that. And then we would, with the capital campaign team, then at another later family meeting, then bring to attention to everyone what's being recommended, particular needs that are being recommended, costs that's being cited, number of years that it would take, steps that the elders are recommending regarding how this is a sacrifice unto the Lord, how to do that, how to see it, ways to go about doing it. So that's one thing that's going on. Nothing's finalized on that regard. As far as I know, some ideas have been talked about, but nothing's been finalized. Also, one thing that needs to be considered as we're moving forward is different philosophy when it comes to budgeting. I know the finance team, they do an amazing job for us. The elders so appreciate that it's not on our plate primarily to do the cuts and figure everything out. The finance team does an amazing job. But also moving forward in years to come, part of it is maybe working with finance team. Nothing is set just because in this year, Kathleen, and 3 to 4 years in a row, Kathleen's closet has been cut. Doesn't mean that will be the case in future years. Doesn't mean we're going to stay at 410 in future years. There's still to come. And I don't want to say let's keep delaying things that need to be done, but there are other matters to consider other than just the funds that will be available from overflow. But regarding whether this is unforeseen because it's been asked for over and over or not, I mean, like you said, one of the key words is it unforeseen? But I think it's one of those things that between the capital campaign, like Brenda is championing that regarding closet, from what I understand. Also, regarding future years of if we are able to get more giving coming in toward the church, if we're able to have members either give more or more members come in who are also giving, there are options moving forward that we can consider. So we're not putting all our eggs in this one basket of overflow. Rather, this was something the finance team brought up, that how can we use it? In particular, it was first related primarily to unforeseen funds. Unbudgeted funds is all that was being considered at first. And so the 50% was added in later to say, let's look outward toward ministry, but also still make sure to take care of ourselves. So as of right now, it would look like regarding unforeseen funds, if that's our emphasis, then we know it's not an unforeseen fund, but are there other options we can consider moving forward? Does that help clarify at all, or did I muddy the waters worse? Okay.
This is from Catherine Chang. She says, thanks, Paul and Scott. I appreciate the answer to my question. Going forward into these days when Jesus' return is drawing near and near, I would really love for our church and its leadership to please revisit the idea of increasing rather than diminishing our willingness to team with the sister churches around the Richmond area who love Jesus too, be they Dover, SBC, or even non-Baptists. While we will always have some differences, we can accomplish so much when we look to the one Savior and hope that we do share. Dover churches and SBC churches traditionally have always been diverse while still allowing each other. I'm waiting on the rest to be typed. The freedom of conscience to study scriptures, yet chosen to yield to one another and team together for the purpose of the gospel and motivated by love for Jesus. I hope we will not give this up lightly.
All right, 3 times. It's my third time up here. So I just want to clarify something with Stephen. So Stephen, I had Greg Pinkard speak to you a couple weeks ago about what you want, what type of refresh you want to do in here. So what you want to do will fall under the capital campaign, because we don't want to have a capital campaign and we don't want Stephen to say, oh, I want to spend $30,000. Well, how come you didn't work that out? So, what we want to do is we want to bring in a consultant, sit down with us, look at the sound needs, lighting needs, seating needs. So all of that's going to fall under the capital campaign. So that's why I had Greg get with you. And again, we've just started this. So you may not have known that, and I apologize if you haven't. So just a clarity.
Thank you, finance team, once again for helping clarify that process. And if you have more questions, you can certainly feel free to put them for those of you on live stream in the comment section, and for us in person also. If you have questions, we can take them at the end. But right now, let's go into the next topic, which is we'll just. Chris will give an update on what we're looking at in light of the recent law changes. But before we go there, I think we're going to be voting on the budget as well as the policy on overflow funds next week, November the 22nd, immediately after the service. So with that, finance team, thank you so much for everything that you do and for helping us walk through all of that.
So can you hear me? Am I on? We good? Coming back? There we go. So I was just joking with Steve. Stephen Ryan told me I had to wipe off any mic I go to use. I noticed Steve was up there just being a pretty face, so I was just joking with him. I had to make sure to clean it off since he used it so much. So what I'm doing at this point in time, and any of the elders can speak to this, no one's over on my left, so I apologize at home if I tend to turn this way. Like I've got Steve and Leanne right here, so I'm still seeing them. So I apologize if I'm not facing you directly. I'm updating you on a conversation the elders have had with Alliance Defending Freedom, a representative from them. Alliance Defending Freedom is a legal organization that seeks to assist churches regarding religious liberty. Two primary services that they offer is that they evaluate your documents, your statements of faith, to see how likely you are to be able to succeed in a legal case, I guess you could say. Are you secure in how you're saying everything? But then also, they will defend a church that is a member with them regarding religious liberty cases. So this is not between churches, this is not between a church and its members, this is really just anything pertaining to the government or a legal matter regarding religious liberty for the church. So at this point in time, I just want to update you, and Scott, please let me know if anyone has a question throughout. I'll stop and deal with that. If you have a question as I'm going through, please raise your hand, go to the mic. I'll stop at that point. Yes, Stephen?
Can you grab the purple microphone, Chris, that's over there on that microphone stand?
Yes. The purple mic, okay.
Sorry, that one's just being not nice.
All right, I started off with yellow, now I've got purple.
There we go.
Good Louisiana colors. All right. Not like they're doing that great this year or anything.
Thank you, Chris. That's a lot better.
Okay, good. All right, so like I said, if you have any questions online, please let Scott know. I will stop in the midst of that, answer that question. If you have questions here, please raise your hand. Head to the orange mic over there, and I will do my best to address that, or one of the other elders can help as well. So I spoke with Kyle McCutcheon. He was the legal representative with ADF who was working with us. He advised me that there are 3 C's for withstanding litigation for matters of church belief and practice. The first C is communicate. You are to communicate your sincerely held religious beliefs, and a court is not supposed to challenge you on your sincerely held religious beliefs. And he kept saying that quote over, and he said to put it down as a quote, sincerely held religious beliefs. Any practices and policies should flow from our sincerely held religious beliefs. And so he gave an example regarding marriage, regarding meetings, that these should flow from that if we're making a statement regarding that. All right, so the first C is communicate. The second C is core documents. Core documents. So these are our written policies. And so written policy is better than verbal or tradition. You need to write it down. So these are things that we need to have in writing. And then also consistent application. So communicate your sincerely held religious beliefs, have them written in core documents, and consistently apply them, because consistency is evidence of sincerity. Consistency is evidence of sincerity. So Kyle McCutcheon, he went through looking at our Constitution as well as other documents. I'm only sharing about the Constitution because the other documents are easy to update. Brenda and I can do that inside of the office regarding if anyone wants to use facilities or anything like that. So those are things the church doesn't really have to worry about most of the time. But regarding the Constitution, I do want to make you aware of these. As the Constitution will outline if you were to read it, there are guidelines for how we are to look at this, and whenever we do go to make a proposal about these things, a certain amount of time has to be considered so that everyone has the ability to ask questions if they have any objections or anything like that. So he advised that we definitely, if you were to look at the Constitution, it's like the first thing he wanted to address with us was our BFM 2000. He said the BFM 2000 definitely addresses the different matters that are being tested by the SOGI laws here in Virginia. And it definitely communicates the core beliefs needed for a church's basis regarding these laws. But he had a big issue with our word basic in there. He said that we definitely need to remove basic from our statement about the BFM 2000, where we say we basically affirm it, because it opens up questions about subjectivity. If you only basically approve it and affirm it, which ones are the ones that you're going to subjectively say, I approve of these and I don't approve of those? And so he strongly advised that we remove that to help protect ourselves. Also, he said regarding membership, that it's not just biblical, but provides a grounding for legal purposes. And most courts will not entertain suits between a member and a church regarding church matters. Just to know that and to help us in understanding how it spells things out whenever there's maybe discipline going on, as long as we're following through once more with communication, core documents, and consistent application. McCutcheon strongly advised adding a line to our covenant of membership regarding beliefs, because as he said, we're going to at some point in time interact with people that are saying they want to be members, but they don't want to believe what we believe as a church. And so he said, he strongly advised adding a line to our covenant that, in quote, what he said was, support the stated doctrines of Grace Community Baptist Church as outlined in our statement of faith. He stated in that way because he said, say that if BFM 2000 is updated. So you're not saying, and then having to update then that particular line, so that's Baptist Faith and Message like 2027 or something like that. We need to spell out the steps in detail of how church discipline is to occur while not overstepping the biblical process. The clearer that we can be about what that looks like, step one, stage 2, stage 3, about how that would go without putting things in place that are unbiblical. Like there's something about Matthew 18 that's very What about now? Yay, we're back. Wonderful. All right. Where was I? Okay. So, Ariel, do you know what the last thing I said was that they heard? Yeah, when I stopped you. Okay. So that's when you know it stopped at that point? Okay, so let me go back to where about a minute was before that. Membership Article 4, Section 8 regards the church discipline process. We need to consider rewording the last sentences regarding not letting a member resign during church discipline process. The constitutional right to assemble also protects the right to disassemble. So he said we may need to consider rewording it to this effect. If a member decides to circumvent the discipline process by withdrawing membership to begin attending another church during the process, Grace reserves the right to communicate with the other church the matters involved with the discipline process, encouraging the former member to continue the discipline process with the Grace community. So in essence, he's saying, instead of saying that we're saying you can't leave and you're going to continue with this, it's saying that we have the right to speak to whatever church that this former member who's under discipline is seeking to then attend, so that church can then encourage this member to continue working with us in order to fulfill the biblical expectation. McCutcheon also recommends that we move Article 11, which is about dispute resolution, to the part under the membership section. He's saying this was an unnecessary section and just, or out of place, not unnecessary, out of place section, and we needed to move it under the membership section. But we need to change the part on legal arbitration. He said that we do not want to set ourselves up for legally binding submission to a third party unnecessarily. So as soon as we say that we are going to submit to the findings of legal arbitration and we go outside of ourselves, then as soon as that happens, we're legally bound by whatever that arbitration determines. So we don't need to do that, he was saying. He and ADF advised ending this entire Article 11 after the words Christian mediation should be attempted, period. It will be like a 2-sentence or 3-sentence article at that point in time. I can't remember exactly how many sentences, and it will be very short, but it'll be very clear. We're trying to do the same thing It's just we don't want to put ourselves in a legal trap at that point in time, he was saying. Also, throughout the document, we need to replace the quote public worship with with wording such as corporate worship for clarity that we are not a public accommodation service. Also, for clarity, after writing about the quorum, this is a recommendation. This is an ASOGI law thing. He was just saying since I'm reading it anyway. After writing about the quorum under the church meeting section, he suggests we write any action taken by the voting members requires a 2/3 vote with the quorum present unless stated otherwise within the Constitution. He was going throughout and he realized, hey, look, everything's 2/3 unless it's certain leadership positions. And then other times when you say you're supposed to vote on something, you don't actually say what percentage is needed for that vote. And so this would help clarify. You don't have to repeat over and over 2/3, and also would cover things such as this that's not listed at this point in the Constitution, what percentage you need. So he said that would take care of some matters that y'all might not see. He did state that our Constitution is a good balance between clear form and expectation while not bogging us down. And he also recommended that we rename the Constitution as Constitution and Bylaws, with Articles 1 through 3 being the Constitution and Articles 4 and on being bylaws. We have to submit our Constitution to the county, I believe, and they have to have it on record. So anytime we go to make a change to our current Constitution, we would have to resubmit the whole thing every time, versus if we just have 1 through 3 as the Constitution and the rest bylaws, we could then only have to resubmit if we actually make a change to Articles 1 through 3. All right, so also I have everything I just now read out loud as papers right here. So those that are here in person, you can see my bullet point type writing right here for what McCutcheon was recommending to us. Any questions at this point in time about ADF's recommendations?
Can you elaborate further on you brought it up in the middle there, and some of our YouTubers may not have gotten this, but okay. There was a statement that you said about if someone in our church is going through church discipline,
right,
and seeks membership at another church during that time,
right.
In our current Constitution, Grace has the right to contact that church to let them know about the issues going on with said member?
Our current Constitution actually says that I can't remember if it says the church or the elders, I can't remember at this time, but we have the right to, according to our Constitution, to deny that resignation. So basically it will be us saying, hey, we're still going on with this even if that person refuses to show up, that we're considering this person still a member and that we're pursuing the church discipline process. There's a difference between where the church was at in the first century and where we're at now, where someone might feel, well, I'm in America, I have this constitutional right, and there's any church that I could go to, so why would I want to go through this church discipline process when I can just get out of it? And so we're still wanting to pursue that church discipline process through because we want to see the person restored. We want to see them redeemed. That's our goal anytime we pursue church discipline. It's not to be harsh or to be mean. We actually want to love the person. But with how things are set up, someone might be able to say, hey, because I know the Constitution of the United States of America, and because I know there are 20 different churches I could possibly attend around here, I'm out. And if they were to push it, they actually would have legal leverage to be able to do so, versus where we're at with our Constitution versus the U.S. Constitution. So if we have this different wording in here where we would be saying that we reserve the right to communicate with any other church that person would attempt to attend for the sake of seeking that church to implore the disciplined member to come back here and work it out with us. So there's a difference between us saying we have this right, you can't go anywhere, and them saying I have the right to go somewhere else. We would then be saying, okay, we recognize what the U.S. Constitution says. We also recognize what Scripture says, and we think you are supposed to stay here. Therefore, we're going to appeal to whatever church you might then go to, and we have that right, and we want you to know before you come to join here, or as you are a member here, that this is the expectation. Once more, discipline is for our good. It's formative, it's corrective, but when it's corrective, we're not trying to be mean or harsh. It's just this is a safeguard for our hearts if we are to wander into sin.
So just to clarify, what you're saying then is, say, I'm trying to think of a name that's not at Grace. Say we have Willie, and Willie is in a situation where he is in disagreement with Grace Community Baptist Church, and we are trying to reconcile with Willie, and Willie then goes on and says, nope, not going to have it. I'm going over to Pump Road Baptist Church, and I'm gonna be a member there. So if I'm hearing you correctly, Chris, at Grace, we would then get that notification that Willie is trying to become a member at Pump Road Baptist, and then we reserve the right to notify Pump Road, like, hey, Willie's misunderstanding some things and trying to just get out of being disciplined. Here's what we're trying to do and reconcile with him.
Correct, yes. That would be the approach that the recommended change by ADF, the recommended change, where this is not being proposed at this point in time, but what they're recommending is that would be the approach that we take in the wording that we use, yes.
Okay.
I think it might be helpful also to share that churches will and do at times, they'll contact the church if there's a person who's coming to join their church, and they'll ask the pastor about that person coming. And but it could be that the church is not aware of the issue at the church that person has left. And I think the spirit of it, as Chris said, is one of being able to seek reconciliation, to seek to restore someone who has a, willful. It's not a difference of opinion. We have differences of opinion, even differences in interpretation of Scripture. But it's if there's an issue that is a willful, sinful action that has, is not consistent with the church and contradicts teachings of the church, then that's an issue that you also want to safeguard another church from having to face this again. So it's wanting to restore that brother or sister, but it's also to be able to communicate so that issue will not be replicated in other churches and cause issues there.
Right. So something you were just now talking about, Don, came up with something with what Catherine was talking about earlier, to make sure that we're still reaching out and partnering with other sister churches. We are actually still partnering with other sister churches. We're not giving that up. Actually, we're trying to be more proactive, and this is one of the things I like about this recommendation with McCutcheon, is that we need to be proactive. I know that you said like most churches will reach out. That's actually rare now, I feel like. We try to do that. We will send letters to let people know about things, let other churches know. I personally contact pastors whenever okay. I was getting word from the back. I was confused. I try to contact pastors whenever we have someone new coming in. If we have someone going to a different church, I try to contact them to say, hey, I know this person's come to your church. This is what's great about them. This is how they've served here. This is how I think you could serve there, but it's really up to y'all. Y'all are the church there. But I have found, and this is one of the important matters, that when it is to talk about why we believe what we believe and how we connect with other churches, I actually tried to talk to another pastor about a discipline matter that was connected to our church, and he basically gave me the hand like this. So it's important to know, like, we try to reach out, we try to relate. Not every church will. If they're in association with us, there is an expectation that they should. That's one of the things when it comes back to, like you were talking about with our faith, and it's willful statement of faith and willful rejection of our faith or willful sin. But in that one particular situation, it was, okay, I'm listening to you long enough. We had members from our church also go speak with that pastor. and also members from another church go speak with that pastor about someone that they believe was not really a Christian, that they showed extreme evidence, not just light, but extreme evidence of not being so, and how that person was leading astray a member from our church. So it's one of those things of the hope is that that's supposed to happen, but I'm trying to be proactive in that. That's one of the things I like about this, but it's not a guarantee if they're not actively associating with us that they actually will listen in that regard. So, yes, Scott.
This is from Sherry Pinkard. What document handles similar church discipline matters for staff if the staff person is not a member?
As far as I know, all our staff are members. But I think she might be asking because of the SOGI laws, I guess in anticipation if we were to hire someone that is not a staff. Is it along those lines? Okay.
Maybe she'll add more to the question here shortly.
Question back to you, Sherry. Are you talking about a hypothetical situation for future purposes?
We'll find out in 30 seconds.
Yeah, I realize it's a 30-second delay. Yeah.
Scott, just raise your hand for Sherry.
I mean, I'll go ahead and start to answer in that regard if it is a hypothetical question. We have staff jobs outlined with expectations and responsibilities. I was speaking with a staff member this past week about the possibility of having regular yearly staff review with me meeting with those different staff members. So that's something that is going to be part of it, I guess. I know the elders and I have met with other staff members at different points in time. But at this point in time, as far as I know, we don't have a church discipline process for a staff member that would not be a member of the church, as much as that it would be a staff job and responsibility matter. And as I'm saying this, I'm realizing the next step is, should we have one of those just in case to help clarify? That's something definitely to be considered is as best as I can say right now. I don't know if I answered your question before you asked it, Sherry, but if I'm nowhere close, please let me know.
She says yes, it was hypothetical.
Okay, all right. So to deal with that, Brenda is never allowed to retire. And then we're gonna just keep everyone on staff from here on out till kingdom come. No, I don't want to have hopeful, wishful thinking. That is a great question to ask, something to be considered that the elders have not considered yet. But thank you, Sherry. That is something that we should have considered and we can moving forward.
She just added that her daughter works at a church and she is not a member. So
Okay.
it happens.
I was trying to rack my brains. Like, I know she works with SPCV. I know they talk about different hypothetical situations, but that helps clarify. Thank you, Sherry. All right, so we got a question from Skip.
Hey, this is off subject a little bit, but since it's Constitution, should we look into what we would do if we can't meet like we had before? You know, and I know that's a lot to unpack.
This is exactly the right time to ask that.
But since we're changing the Constitution, we ought to.
All right,
potentially look at that.
so Skip and I have some context that the rest of you don't have right now. Do you want to help explain what exactly it is, or should I try?
Well, I'm just thinking we were trying to approve personnel matters, and we couldn't meet based on COVID. So we couldn't have quorum and various things, and we were trying to figure ways that we might be able to do that online, but there was really no provisions in our Constitution that let us do those things. And so as soon as I saw that they were going back down to 25, we were worried that would be for churches, and if so, we wouldn't be able to to vote next week, so.
That would have been rather ironic for 2 times in a row.
Right.
For
So-
the governor to call like a reduced number like that, and we were about to vote the next week.
Right.
But no, it doesn't apply to churches. Thank you, Skip. It doesn't apply to churches for right now, but what Skip was pointing out is that with our Constitution recognizes that we follow Robert's Rules of Order. And with Robert's Rules of Order, combined with what state or commonwealth you're from, will determine another matter regarding business meetings. So between Virginia and Robert's Rules of Order, if we don't stipulate in very exact detail of how we could do cyber business meetings, you cannot do them, and you have to have your business meeting inside of a single room in which everyone that is a member could access that room. And so that you have to have a quorum in that room and make availability for absentee ballots. And so if we are not allowed to meet, say that we were reduced down to the 25 person limit, and we were not allowed to meet and make it available to our membership, then we are not allowed to go through with a business meeting, period, unless we put that into our Constitution. And so, yes, Skip, that is something that we can and should look into about putting the exact details as a recommendation part of any constitutional update. I agree. I think that should be in there. But when we go to do that, the elders will be calling on different people who would be vital in that process to make sure we know exactly how we're saying it, so that no one gets left out, that we intentionally try to make sure that it's available for everyone and it's in an accessible form, but at the same time is not burdensome in that form. So, does that make sense? I know that Skip and I had the context. We sat on the same webinar and saw all the same slides and everything about this. And at the end of the day, we were like, so you're telling me we can't even meet at this point in time. So, but gladly we can now. Oh, by the way, Stanley mentioned that we're voting on this coming Sunday, right after service. He mentioned the budget and the overflow policy. I just want to point out we also have a vote on 3 different, three different positions. We have Jim Wilson for reaffirmation for elder, Mike Renfro for personnel committee, and say it again? Jane Kubota for personnel committee. I don't have that in front of me, so sorry for my lapse. Any other questions online or in person?
Were there any questions submitted before the meeting?
I did not receive any. Did finance team receive any questions prior to the meeting? Brenda? No questions prior to the meeting. All right, I'm going to give this 30 more seconds to make sure that anyone watching online, if they have a question, this is your last chance. You've got 30 seconds from now.
Hey, Eric, start the countdown.
Do we have Jeopardy music? Oh, waiting room music, okay. Yeah. Let's not go there. It could be good waiting room music. Oxymoron. Sorry, if anyone in here composes waiting room music, I'm sorry for being so offensive. Okay. All right. I'm going to pass it back to Stanley to let him close this family meeting in prayer, or if he has anything else he'd like to say.
Hold on, Stanley. There you go.
It's hard to take the mask off when you have glasses. But yeah, thank you, Chris. And so if you have any questions, after the family meeting, and you can reach out to any one of us here on the elders, and we will be happy to talk to you about that. So thank you all for joining us here in person to talk about some of these matters, and also for those of you who have attended online. Again, I want to apologize once again for the technical difficulties that we have had at the beginning, and also sometimes in the middle of the conversation. So appreciate you staying with us so patiently, and we just want to thank you. And let's close with a word of prayer. And Scott, since you have the microphone, would you please close us with a word of prayer?
And just real quick before I do that, Sarah Eden said, thank you, finance team and elders.
Thank you, Sarah.
Dear Lord, we just thank you for bringing us all together tonight, both in person and online, to talk about so many important things. And we just want to just thank you for guiding us through these conversations and decisions that have been made by many. And we pray for your will as we move forward in these different areas. We love you, and just want to thank you for allowing us to be a family, and we just want to give you praise. Amen.